2013 Arbor DDA meeting. Roll call. Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heifcha.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein. Here. Al McWilliams.
Here.
John Malott.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We start off with audience participation, and 4 minutes each. We have one person signed up, which is Theodore Morentis.
Hi, good afternoon. Very nice to meet everyone. My name is Theo Morentis. I'm representing 111 North Ashley, and it's across from the Visitors Bureau. I'm the Vice President of the board, and we'd like to thank you all for deciding to increase the population density in the downtown and making our building a reality. The reason I'm here is because I wanted to address one parking meter, or maybe half a parking meter. We have a parking shortage because of the higher density in the building. We have 100 units in the residential space, and it's hard for people to park either during the day and drop off kids or drop off different things they may have shopped, or even during the night, and that's because we don't have control of the space just in front of our entryway. So we wanted to address, it's covered by one parking meter. We would be content if there was something even done with half the parking meter to allow the building to have better use and control of that space. We had potentially envisioned a scratching system where we put a little thing on the dashboard of the cars, 1 to 12 for the months, 1 to 31 for the days, and then the city can retain its revenue from the any parking violations. And the buildings a block north of us on North Ashley, the houses, and a block west of us, they all have residential parking that the houses do control those spaces in front of them. The board has basically moved for somebody to come and present this to the DTA, and I'm their representative. So we're open to any suggestions that could be compliant to existing zoning or other existing issues, and we're open to discussion from the DDA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter, Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
In preparation for tonight's Planning Commission public hearing on revising downtown zoning, the Citizen Advisory Council last night met and reviewed some of the mistakes, what we consider to be mistakes, in current D1 downtown zoning. And we base our recommendations with regard to an analysis of those mistakes on the whole concept in the 2009 downtown plan of encouraging zoning and design approaches which minimize the extent to which high-rise developments create negative impacts on neighbors in terms of height, scale, massing, shading, and harm to natural and historic resources and views. And those items are all in the downtown plan. We believe that the Aaron Purdue group, which we hired to conduct this study, has done a really very good job. And most of our recommendations tend to follow what they've come out of after 3 months, or 4 months, I guess, at this particular point, recommendations. And I'm going to list these as mistakes because they clearly seem to be in terms of the rush that we went through in getting the original zoning done. Our first mistake, the Credit Union parking lot adjoining City Hall on East End should unquestionably be D2. 60 feet, not D1 as it currently is 180 feet. This is clearly an interface area across the street from residential and historic properties in the Old Fourth Ward that need to be protected. And we believe that is also true of all the private properties to the west along the south side of Ann, all the way to North 4th Avenue. The second mistake is an obvious one also, we think. It's made obvious to us because of 413 East Huron, is that the East Huron parking lot east of Sloan Plaza and west of Campus Inn should not be zoned D1, 150 feet, but should be zoned, some would say D2, or some appropriate hybrid, with height less than 120 feet, with diagonal design setback and step back regulations that bring it to no less than 25 feet from Sloan Plaza next door. What we want to do is we want to prevent a future structure being built that will be destructive of the livability of Sloan Plaza, as 413 clearly will be. and also to the Old Fourth Ward Historic District, which is just behind this particular area on Ann Street. And the property owner in this one, Dennis Dahlman, supports this change. And if this change is approved, our hired consultants have recommended that it include the entire block, the entire frontage on the north side of East Huron, all the way to Ashley, in order to be consistent with regard to the zoning. Although not a charge of the City Council, the Amos property on the corner of East Huron and North Division, as well as the property management office next door, should not be D1, 180 feet, but 120-foot hybrid zoning appropriate to sites next to and across the street from one of the most important historic and residential neighborhoods in the city. The third mistake that we made originally, and it's still very controversial, is the property on the east side of South Main and south of East William across from the Ashley Mews. Should not be zoned D1, 180 feet, but D2. But again, some hybrid zoning, including reduced heights, step backs, and diagonal requirements that will protect the historic district properties on East William Street, and as well as the residential and historic houses that line the west side of South 4th Avenue to Packard. We believe that D2 would be best, but something in that area, that hybrid, so we take consideration of the nature of what is there along North 4th Avenue. There are other mistakes that various people want to suggest in terms of change, and those are possibilities. The Ann Arbor community wants us basically to do this. I mean, we've listened to it again and again in all the meetings that take place in the last several months. And at the same time, as recommended by the current zoning study, let's make sure that we no longer give premiums for things we don't want downtown. Whether that's student housing, and we can handle that, but to give premiums to those things we do want. More open space, perhaps affordable housing. But we can make these changes. Thank you.
Communications from DDA members.
First, I would, the last speaker, Mr. Detter, stated that the A2D2 process was a rushed process. Having served on that steering committee for a number of years, it was certainly not a rush process as compared to what's going on now. We took countless community input, community meetings, workshops, went through a lengthy, several years. I can't remember how many years I served on that committee. So it was certainly not a rush process. Secondly, the mistakes that Mr. Detter is alluding to, no one was describing those as mistakes at that point. And certainly the community process at that point clearly indicated that the decisions we made and were approved by City Council had broad-based community support. Just want to correct those statements. Thank you.
I'd love to respond to that later.
Of course you can't right now. Thank you, Ray. Anybody else?
I should mention, I don't know if this is the appropriate point, that we, several of us, Rishi, John Split, Keith Orr, and Susan and I did a field trip to Grand Rapids and met their DDA director, Chris Larson, and looked at a number of things that they're doing there. Particularly interesting to me was their ambassador program. We got quite a bit of information on that program and what they do, just a few of the things that they do. Provide directions to help locate businesses and services, call for medical assistance, provide information on parking, provide social service information to people in need, identify and report hazards and contact police. And I think the thing that caught all our attention was it was raining when we were there, and there was an ambassador holding an umbrella over a woman putting money in a parking meter. So it clearly was something I think we want to take a very serious look at, and I think we will in the Operations Committee. And anybody else who wants to comment on
I was along for the ride, and I was very impressed by the ambassador program as well. Something that I would like to see us take a serious look at implementing in town.
Yeah, it was a very informative trip. That was certainly a big part of it. They did some interesting structural things in terms of how the DDA relates to other organizations within the city, and actually created an umbrella organization that did the visioning for a variety of organizations, including the DDA. It was pretty interesting the way they've done it and the success they've had doing it.
The ambassador program, do they work with the police department?
Yes.
Yeah, it was, they have like a direct contact to them, so they basically, they're not, deputized in any way, but they get to act as eyes and ears for the police department. They also get, because they're trained differently, some of that social service type aspect to it, they're actually able to diffuse situations before they become police situations. In some cases having to do with panhandling, and in other cases later at night having to do with, when bars are letting out. So it was a very interesting approach.
Should emphasize, these are not, assistant cops or anything. They are they hired a company that specializes in just doing this, and they are very customer service oriented. They are there to help. They are certainly not there to enforce the law in any way, and certainly wouldn't be deputized, and that wouldn't be their mission to perform police functions in any way.
And you'll be bringing this to the operations
Yes.
agenda? This one?
I wasn't there, but Susan gave me a rundown yesterday of some of the things, and one of the things that caught my attention was, as Keith was alluding to, if there's somebody having a problem, sometimes rather than the police, they contact social services agency or something of that sort. So, it kind of goes directly to the folks that can help solve the problem, and therefore don't have to bring the police involved and save those resources. So I thought that was a really interesting component that's worth understanding.
Right, I guess two follow-ups to that. One is that oftentimes they would select the right person for the right beat, as it were. So, there was an area where there was lots of social service organizations, and they actually had a social worker as the ambassador working that particular area, because he was able to help them find the services they need, as opposed to, just treating it as some sort of legal problem. And the other thing, though not deputized, they do wear uniforms, so there is a sense of security that is added in terms of the perception, so that people walking around see uniformed people and have a sense that, oh, this is an area that's being patrolled in one way or another.
I wasn't on that trip either, but I'm aware of an ambassador program in Schenectady, New York, where they work with their community's equivalent of the Delana Center, and it not only is an effective program in terms of having assisting folks on the street, but it also has proven to be a nice transitional employment opportunity for folks that may be struggling with that. So since we have that wonderful resource available, that might be an interesting model to look at as well.
Anybody else have anything else? Any other topics?
Just to follow up on something Roger said, I was thinking about it, and that rezoning process took 6 years.
Is that how long it was?
The Downtown Residential Task Force was appointed in 2004. So right after, I think it was early on in the year. And there was an unprecedented amount of public input and workshops that went on over a period of years. I haven't heard of anything in the city that has been as extensive amount of public input as happened. And it, as we often said at the time, we reached a consensus. But to Ray's point, it doesn't mean that we got everything right. But we did take a long time to do it, and people worked very hard on it. And there was a lot of debate about some of the critical decisions. But we'd always never expected every detail of it to be right. But and now we're still working through some of those changes, but it was an exhaustive process.
Yes.
Pages 2 through 9 are the minutes of October 2nd, 2013. Can somebody move approval, please?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
Any changes, modifications, additions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're confirmed. Subcommittee reports, operations.
I will start. We have two resolutions. I'll bring the first one forward, which I believe is on page 10. Resolution to increase the number of parking spaces for the 624 Church Street development under the city's contribution in lieu framework. And I'd like to move the resolution. We have previously approved for this proposed project at 624 Church Street, 42 parking spaces within the public system at a previous meeting, I guess about a year ago or so. Since that time, the project is expanded. They've acquired a house to the south of the original site and are going for site plan approval for that larger project. That larger project, under the city's ordinance for parking in lieu of, would require, I think the total additional amount is 56. Pardon me?
I think it's 53.
53, pardon me. 5 of which will be on site. So they will need 48 to meet the city's parking in lieu of requirement. So that would increase the number of parking spaces within the public system from 42 to 48, which is what this resolution supports. I should also point out that the 48 still falls within our pilot project in the Southview area of allocating spaces based on square footage of building space. So this will not only satisfy the zoning requirement, it still is also within our current parking formula. So I would encourage that we support this. Certainly be glad to try and answer any questions.
I think it's important to note that they will be paying more than a regular customer.
Yes, the parking in lieu of ordinance requires that they pay 20% above the going rate for those parking spaces on a monthly basis. So, yes, it will be additional revenue above what we would normally receive for monthly permits in that area.
We had a good discussion yesterday at the Downtown Marketing Task Force, which meets next on January 7th. And we would invite anyone who wants to attend. We have good discussions there. But the representative from South University was talking about what a wonderful change it has been since they have more residents and more people, and how that is changing the way they look at their street and what's going on with it, and some innovation that they're even talking about things happening there. So there was good excitement about that, and it seems to me that this development will just increase that activity and vibrancy of that area. Yeah. And they're excited about it.
And as a business owner in the Southview area, I can say that the area is definitely becoming more vibrant and more active.
And as I recall, the 48 total spaces refers to the entire building allocation, so it includes the existing
pizza house, yes,
structure.
Yeah, because that is part of the project.
Right, and so I'm going to be supporting this because, of course, it falls within the pilot project guidelines we talked about, so it just makes sense.
Very good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
The next, do you want me to?
Yeah, no, please.
I heard everyone flipping the next page, so I see. What we have here is a resolution to approve the selection of Smith Group, JJR, and Nelson Nygaard as consultants for the downtown street framework plan. I think you folks all have heard, what that is all about. But in a nutshell, it's a joint effort with city staff to look at how we can develop guidelines for streetscapes. And what I'm particularly excited about is that I think it'll be a wonderful tool for the DDA doing street projects, for the city doing street projects, and also for private developers as they come in and look at what's expected and how to develop the streetscapes associated with projects. So I think it's a very good step, and there's been just tremendous good cooperation between DDA and city staff in working through this. So Amber in particular has put a lot of work into this, so I'm going to just read this to give folks a better idea. We created a consultant selection committee made up of city staff from related departments, DDA staff, and a DDA board member, reached out to other communities with similar plans and learned about their processes. As a result, we released an RFQ in early September with 4 teams responding, selected 2 qualified submissions, and invited these teams to submit proposals in mid-October, held interviews with these 2 teams, and made a final recommendation to the Ops Committee in late October. The selection committee recommends hiring the team of Smith Group JJR and Nelson Nygaard to act as primary consultants on the plan. And one thing to clarify too is, I think part of the reason we're saying Smith Group JJR and Nelson Nygaard is that although Smith Group JJR would be the lead for the project, interestingly enough, Nelson Nygaard is actually doing a little bit more of the work. And I think that's tremendous because of their experience and background all over the country, and they've developed some documents already as a guideline that's used through the country. So I think that it's a great approach. They've also done similar plans in San Francisco and Chicago. JJR brings the facilitation skills, engineering, stormwater, those sort of the more technical and nitty-gritty aspects of it. The resolution before you is a not to exceed of $150,000. The budget has been approved for up to $200,000 for potentially adding additional services. And there really are 2 things that folks have identified. One is perhaps some enhanced civil engineering services that the city folks are interested in. And the other piece that I think we as a DDA may be particularly interested in is bringing in an economist to help us analyze the impacts of streetscape projects and help us understand better, be part of the team for developing those guidelines, and potentially to extend it further to include giving us some base data of what we have now in the community downtown in terms of retail and small offices, and et cetera, to help us also look at tools for moving forward, understanding trends of downtowns and so forth. So I think there are 2 aspects. We brought it up last night at the Economic Development Task Force meeting as a possibility of something that could be sort of a dual initiative, piggyback on what we're doing with the streetscape plan. So I think that gives you maybe a nutshell. Did I cover most things, Amber?
Mm-hmm.
Was that moved?
No, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I think that's my job. That's all right. Would you like to move this?
Yes.
Is there support?
Support.
Discussion?
Yes. Any questions?
I will mention that we have worked with Nelson Nygaard in the past on our parking study and parking demand management recommendations, and I think we had a very satisfactory experience with them.
Very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Back to Roger.
Yes. The quarterly financial statements. Favorite part of the meeting. This is for the first quarter of the fiscal year. As for those who don't know, our fiscal year starts on July 1st and runs through June 30th. So this is for the first 3 months through September 30th. If you look at our TIF income, we are slightly below our budgeted amount. We actually almost exactly on budget. There usually are some TIF money that comes in from late taxes, dribbles in still through the year. So we aren't quite where we expect to be, but we anticipate that we will be at about 4.5 million. Operating expenses are lower than budgeted, but we again anticipate that they will be within 3% of what we have budgeted ultimately. Capital expenditures, not a whole lot so far. Again, most of the construction occurs either during the summer and this, so all the construction in the latter part of the summer we really haven't been billed yet for, so it hasn't really shown up on the financial statements yet. Overall, we expect to be very close to our projected budget in TIF. Parking, we've actually exceeded budget slightly. On a quarterly basis, we anticipate being very close to our final, a little over $19 million in gross revenue in the parking system. Operating expenses, we are a little off on this, and this is, we've mentioned this in other circumstances before. The First and Washington costs for that parking structure were budgeted in the last fiscal year, but did not take place in that year because the private contractor doing that project did not finish, and we did not get before the end of the fiscal year, and we did not get a certificate of occupancy in the previous fiscal year, which is the key for us releasing the money to purchase that. So we are showing up with some timing of some of the costs in this fiscal year for the down payment that would not, that actually were budgeted in the previous one. So we will at some point need to do a budget revision to reflect that. It's not any additional cost, it's purely a timing between the two fiscal years. Direct parking expenses, slightly under budget, which is nice. Thank Art Lowe and his staff for that. So overall, again, we anticipate being very close to budget by the end of the year, the deviation being that First and Washington structure. Again, on parking maintenance, just again getting started. We've done a lot this summer. Not a lot of the bills have showed up. So we have a fairly small amount of money actually spent to date, but we anticipate spending right around the $2.3 million that we have budgeted for parking maintenance. Housing is right about where we anticipated it being. And I'd be glad to answer any questions, or with Joe's assistance, any questions. The next page is basically a graph of this. If everything occurred in exactly the equal time throughout the year, we would be at 25% on everything. The actual being the darker line and the budget being the lighter line. Obviously on TIF income, since we get that almost all in the beginning of the year, we've received almost all of that. Moving on, there are both income and balance sheet statements for each of the funds. They're reflected in the budget numbers. Just to briefly go over the fund balances. And again, I should emphasize these are unaudited returns. We are still, the auditors are still finishing up their work. We've got a draft, but we don't have the final audit yet. But we have slightly over $1 million in the housing fund, although most of that is committed to projects the board has approved, including the First and Washington project. I missed the TIF fund balance. Yes. Yeah. TIF fund balance is about $5.3 million at this point. parking fund balance is about 3.3 million. Again, TIF fund is of course high because we received the income for virtually the whole year, but have not spent it yet. And again, there's a timing issue on the parking balance fund on the First and Washington structure. And any questions on the income statements or balance sheets? On page 22 are the parking numbers for the first quarter. The revenues were up about 8%, hourly patrons up about 4% for this quarter versus the same quarter a year ago, with revenue virtually $5 million. And there's some graphs on both weather, football games, and so forth that may affect it. Try and give you a little perspective between the two quarters. Should also point out that we actually have a few fewer spaces than we had in a year ago, but still have 4% more hourly patrons and 8% more revenue.
And a quick question on that. That's under meters is where most of that difference is. Mm-hmm. Are those meters temporarily out of service for some reason?
Usually it's
meters where they've been taken out of service.
It's usually meter bags. Okay. If you notice that. Actually, both are up this year. I'm trying to remember if Joe, do we have anything out of
yes, there
service?
Yes, areas where meters were removed in the system.
Okay.
That's reflected in the year-to-year numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there are about 27 fewer meters. Is that right, Joe? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The next page is something that we produce once a year, and again, I want to emphasize these are not the audited returns since we have not received the audit yet, but we do a rough profit and loss on each structure and surface lot, each element of the parking system. And it illustrates, in general numbers, that what we have said is that we have an entire system that works together and financially is quite solid as a whole entire system. Newer structures don't make money and never have until their bonds are paid off, but they're supported by the structures and the surface parking and on-street parking to help finance those during the bond repayment period. So, for instance, if we looked at the two structures that have the highest occupancy for 4th and Washington and the Forest structures, both of those actually have lost money even though they've been around for not quite 20 years and are at very high occupancy levels. That's because the bond payments on that have not been paid off. Once those are paid off, both of those become very profitable structures. Good example would be, for instance, Liberty Square or Ann Ashley, two structures that are more like about 25, 30 years old now, with their bonds paid off, and both are very profitable structures. I mean, Liberty Square, although it's certainly not the largest because it's automated, makes almost $1 million a year. Russ.
That being said, there will always be bond payments because there will always be capital maintenance. So, those expenses are essentially consistent over time if you have a properly maintained parking system.
Yes, there will always, correct. There will always be bond payments, assuming the system either expands or needs major capital work.
So it's fine to track the bond payments against the individual parking structure with which the bond is taken out. There's a certain value in doing that. But I don't want the DDA board or the public to think that, you know, at one point all the bonds are paid off. And then there's, you know, even, it's our job in terms of looking after this capital asset to make sure that it is maintained in a way that is proper and appropriate, which will essentially always indicate that there's that there's this level of capital maintenance and investment in those properties, as indicated with those bond payments on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and indeed, Maynard and Fourth and William, Fourth and William being the largest one, isn't particularly profitable because we have spent a huge amount of money on that structure over the years, both in major reconstruction and expansion of it. Maynard also, about 10 years ago, we spent almost $11 million doing major reconstruction in that. And older structures, even with our enhanced maintenance, are ultimately going to need major structural improvements. So you're absolutely correct that we don't reach a point where everything's paid off and everything's wonderful. It's a system that needs ongoing both routine maintenance and major maintenance if it's going to be maintained in a proper manner. And for those of us, you and I, who have been around long enough, know what it was like when they weren't maintained in a proper manner.
Yes.
Questions? I think that's the end of the financials.
Bike share?
Actually, a couple of bike updates. One is on the bike share. The CEC, or Clean Energy Coalition, has indicated that they need to request from the DDA some on-street spaces for the stations in areas where they can't be located on a sidewalk or some other nearby area. We're still waiting on that revised request. We thought we were going to make it this month, but it's been postponed one. They have gotten their report back from B-Cycle, which is the vendor that they're using for these, which included all sorts of modeling of these different areas, except for the parking space ones. So they're still working out some of the details on that to see what sort of a request they're going to be coming to us with. And I believe they are planning at this point of coming to us with that request at transportation at the end of November, so that we will actually have a resolution at our December meeting. I know we've said that before, but hopefully that will happen. In most respects, they are on target for starting operations in the spring. I believe Earth Day is when they want to do the rollout. The one thing they haven't decided yet is a name for the program. There's a little program up there, What's My Name? And there's a contest going on to name it. The poster does have information about how to do that either through the CEC's website or their Facebook page, which is Ann Arbor Bike Share. So that's the update on bike share. Any questions about that part?
I did notice in New York they got over the naming issue by selling the rights.
Indeed, in New York, which was a huge city bank, paid for it, so it's known as City Bike. Since most of the funding from this is coming from CPAC funds, I was suggesting CPAC Bike, but no one thought that rolled off the tongue too well, so they're going ahead with their naming contest. Let's see. The other bike news is abandoned bikes. Over the years, and we've received many concerns both about pedestrian issues and from property owners about abandoned bikes in front of their property. And we've always tried to work with the city on this, and we finally have a system worked out. October, they did, the city staff did a great job working with us to respond about those concerns. They created a process to identify and remove bikes. The only thing they didn't really have were some of the resources to actually do that. DDA stepped up by having Republic provide some of those resources. So with the help of the Republic staff, over 50 junk bikes were removed from downtown sidewalks in mid-October. They also have now a storage space for ones that aren't deemed junk, but actually bikes with value. One of the reasons they've always been afraid to take those out is they didn't really have a process and a storing system for that, and they do now. So moving forward, abandoned bikes that aren't junk will be able to be removed and with a recovery system possible. So we've got a good system in place, and both the AAPD and Community Standards are excited about it. Actually, they really like it. In fact, the Community Standards, what is her name?
Jessie.
Jessie, thank you, was just so excited about it. She was like ready to go out every other week, which is probably more than we really need to do. So certainly, at least on a quarterly basis, they're going to be doing a sweep with the assistance of the DDA.
Roger, I assume you're on the connector?
Yes, the connector study is getting closer to the end. Next week, we have several public meetings where we are trying and encouraging people to come. We have a number of different alignments, actually 6 different alignments, but they can be mixed and matched together. And we would like to try and get as much community input as possible on what the community thinks about the different alignments. As well as we'll do some discussion of different types of mode. And I just want to announce that the public meetings on next Thursday, the 14th, a week from this Thursday, are from 9:30 to 11 a.m. at the Mallett's Creek Library on East Eisenhower, from 1 to 3 at the Downtown Public Library, and from 6 to 8 at the Traverwood Library on Traverwood. And certainly encourage everyone to come and give your input and get updated on where we are.
Do any of the modes and alignments include discussion of gondolas?
No. I think that the consultants haven't been very enthusiastic about that for a couple reasons. The main one is capacity. The amount of traffic between Central Campus, the Medical Center, and North Campus is something right now in excess of 30,000 trips a day, which puts this into the mode of a light rail system. That is the level of types of systems that are used throughout the country for that level of service. And if there's continued growth, which is anticipated, we're going to need something that's even beyond that. The gondolas that we're looking at don't have that capacity. There are some proposed designs that would have higher capacity than the current ones, but no one has actually built any of them or tested them. And I think our consultants probably wisely are staying to proven technologies. But I think there's a general concern that you probably couldn't move enough people through a gondola system, as attractive as it might be. Sorry.
John and I are disappointed.
Well, I think there's still a chance that discussion can come back with a mixture of modes.
Yes.
And gondolas being one of them, because the on-the-ground infrastructure is much, much smaller than some of the other modes being done.
Absolutely. Okay. So, if you get a chance, please attend one of those meetings.
Parking structure repairs, is that you? Update?
Do you have information? You did last time. I don't have any information other than work is ongoing, and I expect that it will continue until construction season is over.
Seems to be just about done.
Anything, I don't know of anything else.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I think it's nearly completed.
Exactly.
Seems to be completed in Maynard anyway,
Yeah.
which is
Friday's
what I'm
the last
familiar
day.
with. Pardon me?
Friday will be the last day.
Friday will be the last day.
In the entire system?
Yes.
Friday is the last day.
Good job, John.
Thank you, John. And finally, on the Operations Committee, we have an NHL-related events, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day item.
So an update, I brought this to your attention last month. I, and along with DDA staff and Republic staff, have joined city staff and university staff at some planning meetings. And just as a brief update on this, City Council will be asked at their meeting on Monday, November 18th, to approve a plan that in essence would create transit and parking strategies similar to what might be a home football game. The difference is this would take place on New Year's Day at the stadium when ATA is not running, the blue buses aren't running, and so forth. What we have contributed to it is the idea that we would charge for parking. The reason behind it is it would enable us to allow people to reserve their parking space, because with 100 and something thousand people showing up at the stadium, one of the key pieces is to get as many of them to not go to the stadium right away, but in fact to park away from the stadium. They've got arrangements with Briarwood. They'll be paying Briarwood to allow for parking there. They'll have shuttles running from Briarwood to downtown. There'll be shuttles running from the hotels on the west side of town. Shuttles also running, I believe, from the north side of town. There'll be 2 downtown shuttles, and those 2 downtown shuttles are coincidental. Their stops will be at our garages. For instance, there'll be a stop at the Library Lane garage, a stop at Forest, and so forth. Again, a reservation system allows more cars to be parked away from the stadium and the patrons to make their plans before they actually get to town. We've asked Republic to be ready with a game plan, assuming that council is not uncomfortable with this, including flaggers, and then also they would be handing out a map. So patrons who are not as familiar with Ann Arbor would know which garage they parked in. It's easy enough to find the stadium. You walk down the hill. After many hours of being in a stadium, it may not necessarily look as easy how to get back. Which garage was I in anyway? So we'll be working on that. Yeah, there's that piece of that. With that, in the map, I want to put out there to the public, especially to our downtown business community, the Visitors Bureau is managing for us a communication strategy. They will be gathering the names of businesses that will be open on New Year's Eve. Please get to me and I'll get to the Visitors Bureau if your business would like to be open on New Year's Eve. Many of our New Year's Day, excuse me, are not usually open on New Year's Day. That way we can hand this information out on those maps. It'll be up on the Visitors Bureau website. They'll also be coordinating communication with the NHL. New Year's Eve, the Visitors Bureau is robustly putting together a program on Main Street that is likely to draw at minimum 10,000 people. They have as a signature performer the woman who came in second last year on The Voice, or she's a U of M grad, so she's got a very strong local base. They've got some DJs that I guess are just regionally really renowned, and that on top of our usual activity levels on New Year's Eve. So any activities like that, we want to be sure they're aware of our downtown businesses. If you have specials going on for New Year's Eve, again, please get them to me so that I can get them to the Visitors Bureau. I'd like to be able to communicate this to our visitors. It looks like the plans are coming together well. Again, the last step, I think, is to make sure City Council is comfortable with all the logistics planning that's underway, and then we'll be sure to work in support of whatever the decisions are regarding the parking component. Thank you.
Got a related question. Maybe, John, you might be the best one to ask this question of is, I'd be curious how the community so far has sort of reacted to this upcoming event. What kinds of things are you hearing out there for? I'm looking at you mainly because, because I thought maybe you'd be a focal point for people getting input.
Yeah, you have to be careful with John around here.
They're way too
Well, we had an update also from Convention and Visitors Bureau at yesterday's Downtown Marketing Task Force, and I think there's a lot of people, just from what I hear, there's a lot of people in Arbor saying, "Wow, we never really do anything on New Year's Day. It's usually a day of rest, so to speak," and people are pretty okay with this, is what I've been hearing. But also, Convention and Visitors Bureau made a point that Toronto has a population of people that are willing to travel to these games. It's really an opportunity for Ann Arbor to be showcased. And we may be able to, there's 45,000 people, something like that, coming from Toronto alone.
Something like that, all on buses.
On buses. And then so the others are going to enter. We can showcase ourselves to a population that lives in one of the finest cities in North America. Discussions about the mayor aside, I've been following the mayor there for a long time. He's got some issues. But,
I hope you mean following him.
Following his exploits in the press.
We were just going to show this little YouTube video.
Yeah, but so it's an opportunity for us to really shine, and maybe if you get 10% of those people who want to come back to do something in Ann Arbor, that's a really big thing. So those types, it's a real good opportunity being presented to us, and I think you'll also note Ontario was way ahead of us in anti-smoking in bars and things like that in restaurants. But yet I'm in Ontario once in a while, and you'll go by a place, and what they've done is create these outside porches outside. And in January, it is not unusual to see 20 or 30 people outside without even their coats on, having a beer and a cigarette. So I think that the fact that the weather may be cold on January 1 or on New Year's Eve day or whatever, that's not going to bother these folks at all. And then the other point to be made is Canadians are generally more polite than Americans in different surveys, and so I think it's going to be a great crowd.
Part of the reason I was asking that is that I think it's a great example of, the community being open to events that build on what we already do. That obviously the football game culture and all that, and there are a lot of people who gripe about things or are concerned about things, but all in all, it seems as though the community really does embrace examples of, do what we're doing now, just do more of these kinds of things. So I think it's an exciting event.
There's a concert being staged on Main Street on New Year's Eve. Something else to be aware of is there's a big hockey game at Comerica Park of alumni of Toronto and the Red Wings on New Year's Eve. So a lot of the fan entertainment is happening in the Detroit area. It's unfortunate, but a reality that not only is the bus system closed down, but the university's closed down and all their venues are closed down.
The NHL is bringing in buses.
Right. And I think that the mayor of Toronto is just proof that our mayor is not trying hard enough to create controversy.
Does the city council need to pass a resolution allowing us to charge for parking on New Year's Day?
I don't think so.
No, well, it's more to bring it to their attention in case there is a concern. We didn't want to affirmatively begin to promote it until we let council know about it. So it's not so much asking permission as making sure that if there are concerns, we hear about it before we do it.
In the discussion yesterday at the Marketing Task Force and with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and with the university, Jim Costine was there, these folks are paying a whole lot of money for these tickets, and to come here, they don't care if we charge for parking, so we want to make sure we cover our costs if we're going to do any extra stuff. It's really a smart thing to do.
And there's also the one other planning issue is, of course, if there's bad weather on January 1, then it all gets pushed back to January 2.
7 p.m., so 1 p.m. on New Year's Day, 7 p.m. if it gets moved on the 2nd.
That presents its own set of challenges.
You were going to say the same thing?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, so it is set for 1 p.m. on.
New Year's Day.
Okay. Good to know.
Bad weather in January? Come on.
Be 50 degrees.
All right. You guys all done with your operations?
I guess.
All right.
When is our next meeting?
November 20th.
At 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Note the earlier date.
Yes. Say
Joe.
not to have it.
Can you tee up on partnerships here? Talk about the IDA conference.
Yeah. So in our partnerships meeting, we spent a lot of time debriefing from IDA, which is International Downtown Association, which many of us attended. And as usual, it was very valuable. We really learned a lot from people from all over the country and places. Canadians, too. There were quite a few Canadians there. So it was another time for a little Canadian sharing. Topics range from nurturing downtown streets, which aligns with the street framework effort that we talked about, to role of arts and culture. And some of the topics of particular interest was the way to create metrics of success. For instance, we learned, like, our State of Downtown report that we did is a great start, but we can even be doing more, and that's what a lot of organizations similar to our DDA, most of the ones who attended these were BIDs, Business Improvement Districts, that they act as a source for information and a source for statistics for the downtown. We were struck by evolving technology to capture pedestrian and business traffic. There's a lot of new technology out there, and while we're used to kind of hiring interns to stand there with counters, there's a lot of other kind of new things with cameras, et cetera, that people are doing. And locally, we have tools like the Flock Tag and GoPass that might offer us that kind of insight to get more information. And we know that both Al and Rishi talked about their knowledge of those kinds of things that we can utilize. We also learned more about open space management. And New York was a great example of this, where they have about 67 business improvement districts throughout the city, and they work with nonprofits to create and manage and enliven public spaces, and we saw a lot of how that works. One of the things we're always talking about is you go to New York and you see a wonderful kind of open space or park area, and you think, wow, this is great that it just exists like this, and they don't just exist, but they are managed separately with public input. Another theme of the conference was advocating for the downtown, and that's been something that we've been trying to work on with trying to put emphasis on our communication efforts, and that, again, we benefited from Alan and Rishi in talking about some ideas for that. So we discussed the importance of helping the community understand what the DDA does through marketing communication ideas, to brand the downtown as a whole, providing businesses with a means to expand their customer base. We talked about the possibility of a downtown marketing plan. And then it sounds like, from what Roger said, that the trip to Grand Rapids further confirmed this, because they've undertaken that kind of coordinated effort. So that was mostly what we talked about at the partnerships. If you want to add anything else that I have forgotten?
I think that we talked a lot about metrics and choosing different metrics to follow. So the downtown report really is a solid base, but there are more creative ways to track things, and that's what I personally took out of the conference. But then I also realized those were probably self-selected programs that somehow I'm interested in. So you get a little bit of that tainting that goes along with it.
I guess one little thing is that along the lines of retail and small businesses, I found it interesting to hear about the shifting trends, and how people shop and what might be expected in the next 25 years. And I think that's a very important piece for Ann Arbor to think about moving forward. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that I enjoyed, and I think Joan spoke to this, the private-public piece, was on the High Line, which is an elevated rail that's been turned into a park. There's an area where you go under a building, and it's parked, but there was a big display by Kindle with couches and coffee stands and all, and there were just tons of people there. So, and my understanding is it's a joint effort between Kindle and the High Line to work together and do things. So I thought it was just a wonderful example of the kind of thing that maybe there's some possibilities here, these kinds of things.
Well, the High Line's run by a full conservancy, and it's all private. So they rent that space to Kindle to do that, and it helps fund other nice things going on there.
Yeah.
I like the subways.
Okay,
Well,
let's go.
now the connectors are, you think gondolas are crazy.
It's in subways.
Indeed.
Got these boring machines.
Next meeting, Wednesday, November 13th at 9 a.m.
Right, next week?
Other DDA business. Susan?
So, as many of you may know, I am your DDA FOIA coordinator. And in April of this year, we received a FOIA request from Mr. Dave Askins, and we responded by providing documents. In October, Mr. Askins contacted us and let us know that we had redacted content but hadn't noted this in our letter. And he has submitted an appeal because of this. So as your coordinator, I'm letting you know we've received the appeal, but I've reviewed the documents, and I am letting you know that we'll be providing a clean copy and therefore meeting the request as originally submitted. So again, a FOIA, an appeal, and now we'll be meeting that request. So thank you.
Thank you. It appears that we've been inundated lately with FOIAs, and I'd like the executive committee to review our current policies and see some other policies that the city, AATA have in place, and take a look at what we might do to refresh ours, make it clear. Any other DDA business? Their audience participation. You can have 4 minutes each.
Hello, Nancy from the Get Downtown program, and I have 2 updates to provide to you. One more the ride focused and one more Get Downtown focused. We are employees of the ride, but we often do separate things as well. So first of all, you probably are aware that there are a series of public meetings going on right now for the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. They're putting forth a 5-year transit program. And a lot of downtown stands to benefit from what is in that program, including service past midnight on a lot of the routes, some commuter service from Saline, which is we hear a lot of people that want that service that are commuters, and a lot of enhanced services for Ann Arbor itself, as well as connections to Ypsilanti. And so there's a series of public meetings, but I wanted to let you know that as sort of stakeholders in the downtown, all of the information about that 5-year program is on movingyouforward.org. And so if you want to see what's going on there, all of it is contingent upon funding. But right now it's a good time just to educate yourself, just like with the connector study, and know what's going on with those services. Because I know, especially for us, knowing that there are many people that live in Ypsilanti that work in Ann Arbor, we hear that all the time, that work in the downtown. We know that enhanced service would help those individuals. And then we also know that we have lots of evening businesses that are opening late, and even places like Barracuda where employees are working until 10, 11 at night. They want to be able to have lots of transportation options. So just cueing you into that. And then the second one is we are starting our registration process for an event we call Conquer the Cold, which is a winter commuting event that Get Downtown runs. And it's registration for the commuting competition, which happens in January, starting now until January. And we've got some really cool things planned. We have a couple of winter bike commuting classes. We're doing 6 of them this year. We're opening them up to anybody in the community. And they're going to be here as well as at Mighty Good Coffee. And we have had an insane amount of interest in that. We've got 80 people so far who are registered across these classes. So some of our classes are almost 30 people who are registered for those classes. So that's way more interest than we've seen before. So I don't know if this is a trend or if we've just been really much better at targeting people this year. But we're going to do those classes, and our first one will be at the DDA next Wednesday in the evening, and then we'll hold some others. And that's on our website. And then the Conquer the Cold Winter Commuting Challenge is in January. We're encouraging people to try to bike, bus, walk, carpool in the winter months, because we have winter months here. We might as well enjoy them and do something fun. If people want to snowshoe or ski, those are also options. We're happy to accommodate them. People can earn badges for doing things. We have an abominable snowman badge, which you give if people log a certain number of commutes. Some other exciting prizes. We also are giving everybody a fleece Conquer the Cold scarf for the first 200 people that sign up. And Bivouac has generously donated a $500 gift card, which is the grand prize that we'll give to one of the individuals that accomplishes certain things during Conquer the Cold. So all that information about that event is at conquerthecold.org, and sign up for the Winter Commuting Challenge is happening now, and our Winter Bike Commuting classes and other information is also on there. So invite you to check it out. Thanks.
And the 5-year plan, it's
Yes.
moving you forward.
Movingyouforward.org, yes. Or you
Okay.
can just go to the ride.org. That's just sort of their site for all of their planning information. Moving You Forward.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Edward Vilmetti. I wanted to share with you two things. One, I've started to organize a Ann Arbor Civic Technology meetup, the goal of which is to get citizens involved with technology in the city. We've had 2 meetings so far. They're on the first Monday of each month, no, the fourth Monday of each month. The upcoming one is on the fourth Monday of this month at Menlo Innovations. The topic is public data sources, looking for local, county, state, and national sources of data for citizens to get engaged in, to either develop applications or better understand their workplace or living place or whatnot. So I encourage you to share that with people you know who are interested in technology in the city. As an example of that, I also wanted to share with you the board. A number of years ago, I came to the board with a plan to provide mobile access to parking data, and the DDA has subsequently changed its website and published some of that data in a form that I've been able to, again, redo. This is mostly for my own use. I have no current indication that it's a good idea to publish this without talk to people beforehand doing it, but I'm happy to show anyone what I've come up with, and very quick one-page which parking structures are full, which parking structures are empty view of the system that might be interesting. Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Dave DeVardi. I used to be on the DDA, and it's great to see some of my former colleagues are still here and some new ones have joined you. I'm just here to put forward an idea I've been thinking about for some time and have actually mentioned to a couple people around this table and others in the community, and that's to do something in the direction of affordable housing, looking at the old site of the Ann Arbor Y down on 5th across from the library. And what I'd like to propose is the DDA look at some way that you can ante up the substantial amount of money that's still owing as debt on that site, remove all debt, and that would allow the city debt-free a range of options. I'm not going to suggest right here a particular option that I might advocate, but I think it gives the city the ability to leverage that and do something towards affordable housing, either on that site or somewhere else, or if the will of the council would be in a different direction, it would enable them with that debt-free situation to use that land in other ways. And I would appreciate it if I'd be willing to work with people on a committee and flesh out ideas, or happy to talk to any individuals here to go deeper into some of the thoughts I've put into this already. Thank you very much.
We're good. Are there other audience participation? Seeing none, motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Support? All in favor?
Aye.
Done.